The notification on the marble countertop didn't make a sound, but the screen lit up just enough to reveal a message that should have been buried. Can't wait for tonight. Victoria didn't panic when she saw me looking. She just sipped her wine with the terrifying calmness of a woman who believes she is untouchable. That was the moment I realized our 10-year marriage wasn't a partnership anymore. It was a crime scene waiting for a detective. If you know the suffocating weight of a truth you're too afraid to speak aloud. Stay with me, because this silence is about to break. The silence in the penthouse was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, like the air inside a submarine diving past its safety limit. Outside, the Chicago skyline was a grid of amber and steel, a testament to order and structure. Inside, everything Ethan Bennett had built was quietly disintegrating. Ethan stood by the kitchen island, the cold quartz biting into his palms. He watched his wife, Victoria, across the room. She was bathed in the harsh, artificial glow of her smartphone, her thumb scrolling with a rhythmic, almost hypnotic cadence. She was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, her silk blouse pristine, her blonde hair swept back, her posture rigid. She hadn't looked at him in 20 minutes. "You're smiling," Ethan said. His voice was low, careful. He wasn't trying to start a fight. He was just trying to bridge the gap. Victoria's thumb froze. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of irritated exhaustion, as if he had interrupted a crucial business negotiation rather than a scroll through Instagram. "I'm reading a comment from a client, Ethan. Don't start." I didn't say anything. Ethan walked around the island, carrying 2 glasses of Pinot Noir. He placed one near her elbow. She didn't acknowledge it. "I just noticed you seemed happy. We haven't really talked since I got back from the site." "I've been busy," she clipped, finally locking her phone and placing it face down on the table. The sound of the glass screen hitting the marble was a sharp clack that echoed in the high-ceilinged room. Managing the fallout from the charity gala requires actual focus, not idle chatter. Ethan felt the familiar tighten in his chest, a mix of anxiety and humiliation. For months, this had been their dynamic. He was the intruder in her life, the annoying roommate she couldn't quite evict. "Vic," he said, trying to keep the pleading note out of his voice. "I saw the notification before you flipped it. It was a DM. From Julian." The air in the room shifted. It grew colder. Victoria turned on her swivel stool to face him fully. Her eyes, usually a warm hazel, were hard and flat. "So you're spying on me now?" "I wasn't spying." The phone lit up. "I was standing right there." "You are always standing right there," she said, her voice rising, sharp and accusatory. "Hovering. Watching. It's suffocating, Ethan. Do you know how creepy it looks? I post a story, and you view it within 10 seconds. I check in at a restaurant, and you text me asking who I'm with. It's pathetic." Ethan blinked, stunned by the sudden offensive. "I'm your husband. I interact with your posts because I support you. I text you because I care about your day. You do it because you're insecure," she spat. She stood up, grabbing her phone again as if it were a weapon. "You're obsessed with monitoring me. It's bad for my brand, Ethan. People talk. They say you're like a leash around my neck." "Julian even mentioned." "Julian?" Ethan interrupted, his voice hardening. "Why are you discussing our marriage with Julian Thorne?" Victoria let out a dry, incredulous laugh. She ran a hand through her hair, pacing the small distance between the fridge and the counter. "Oh my God. You are unbelievable. Julian is a friend. A colleague. He understands the pressure I'm under. Unlike you, he doesn't treat me like property. I treat you like my wife," Ethan said, the anger finally simmering beneath his calm exterior. "But maybe that's the problem. Maybe you don't want to be a wife anymore." Victoria stopped pacing. She looked at him with a chilling clarity. There was no love in her expression, only calculation. She was a PR crisis manager assessing a liability. "I need space, Ethan. Digital space. Mental space." She took a step closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a blade. "I can't breathe with you constantly refreshing my feed, tracking my location, liking every single thing I do like a desperate fanboy. So what are you saying?" "I'm saying this needs to stop." She held up her phone, the screen dark. "Unfollow me." Ethan stared at her. "What?" Unfollow me. On Instagram. On Twitter. Turn off the location sharing on my iPhone. She listed the demands with the precision of a hostage negotiator. If you trust me, you don't need to watch me. If you can't do that, if you can't give me this one basic boundary, then we are done. The room fell silent again. The refrigerator hummed. The wind howled softly against the 40-story glass. Ethan looked at the woman he had married 10 years ago. He remembered the vows, the shared struggles of their early 20s, the way they used to build dreams together. Now, she was asking him to erase himself from her public life to prove a trust she had already broken. He knew, with a sudden, sickening clarity, what this was. It wasn't about privacy. It wasn't about space. It was about hiding. She wanted him off her feed so she could live a double life without his name popping up in the likes to remind her of her guilt. She wanted to curate a reality where he didn't exist. You're serious, Ethan said softly. Unfollow you, or we're done. Dead serious, Victoria said, crossing her arms. Choose. Right now, your insecurity or our marriage. She thought she had him. She thought he would crumble, apologize, and promise to be better, giving her the ultimate license to cheat in peace. She expected the architect to patch the cracks she had made. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. The screen illuminated his face in a ghostly blue. He unlocked it, opened the app, and navigated to her profile. Victoria__PR. 50,000 followers. He looked at the button that said following. He didn't look up at her. He didn't cry. The sadness that had weighed him down for months suddenly evaporated, replaced by a cold, steel resolve. If she wanted him gone, he would be gone. But she had forgotten one thing about architects. They know exactly where the load-bearing walls are, and they know exactly how to bring a structure down. He tapped the screen. Unfollow. Then he went to settings. Stop sharing location. He slipped the phone back into his pocket and looked her dead in the eye. Done, Ethan said. Victoria blinked, a flicker of surprise crossing her face before she masked it with a smug, satisfied smile. She thought she had won. Good, she said, picking up her wine glass. I'm going to bed. Don't stay up late. She turned and walked down the hallway, the heels of her slippers clicking on the hardwood. Ethan watched her go. She didn't know that done didn't mean he had complied. It meant he was finished. He waited until the bedroom door clicked shut. Then he pulled his phone back out. He didn't open Instagram. He opened his contacts and scrolled down to a number he hadn't used in years. Sarah Lynn, Family Law. He hit the call button. It rang once, twice. Ethan, a surprised voice answered. It's late. Is everything okay? Ethan looked out at the Chicago skyline, dark and indifferent. No, Sarah, he said, his voice steady. I need to file, and I need to do it before she wakes up. The morning sun hit the quartz countertops with a brilliance that felt invasive. Ethan had slept in the guest room, a decision he hadn't announced but simply executed. When he walked into the kitchen, dressed in his charcoal suit, the smell of espresso was already sharp in the air. Victoria was leaning against the island, scrolling. It was a tableau he had seen 1,000 times, but today, the context had shifted entirely. She looked up as he entered, her expression bright, almost victorious. There was a lightness to her movements that hadn't been there in months. The relief of a woman who believes she has successfully managed a problem. Coffee's fresh, she said, gesturing to the machine. She didn't ask why he hadn't slept in their bed. She didn't need to. In her mind, his exile was a natural penance, a timeout for his bad behavior the night before. Thanks, Ethan said. His voice was even, stripped of any inflection. He poured a cup, black, and took a sip, leaning against the counter opposite her. I slept so well, Victoria said, stretching her neck. It's amazing what a little boundaries can do. Don't you feel better? Less anxious? She was baiting him, looking for the apology, the admission that she was right, and he was the suffocating, insecure partner she had painted him to be. Ethan looked at her. He noticed the new earrings she was wearing, diamond studs he hadn't bought her. He noticed the way her phone was angled slightly away from him. I do feel different, Ethan admitted. It wasn't a lie. He felt the numb clarity of a man who had survived a crash and was walking away from the wreckage. See, Victoria smiled, a tight, PR-approved expression. I told you. Social media is toxic for relationships. We don't need to live in each other's pockets. It's healthier this way. Her phone pinged. A double vibration against the marble. In the past, yesterday, even, Ethan would have glanced at it. He would have asked, casually or pointedly, work? Or who's that? It was the reflex of a husband trying to bridge the widening gap. Today, Ethan didn't even blink. He kept his eyes on his coffee. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't hold his breath. He simply didn't care. Victoria's eyes darted to him, waiting for the reaction. When it didn't come, she faltered for a microsecond, a glitch in her script. She picked up the phone, unlocked it, and typed a quick reply. A small smile played on her lips, the smile meant for Julian. She looked back at Ethan, expecting him to be stewing. He was checking his watch. I have a site visit in the West Loop, he said, placing his mug in the sink. I'll be late tonight. Oh, Victoria said. The indifference threw her off balance. Well, I have that dinner with the new client, the tech investor, so I'll be late too. Okay, Ethan said. You're not going to ask who it is? Ethan turned at the doorway. He looked at her, and for the first time, he saw her not as his wife, but as a stranger living in his house. No, Victoria. I unfollowed you, remember? Your life is your own. He walked out before she could respond. The elevator ride down to the garage was silent. As soon as the doors closed, shielding him from the cellular service of the penthouse, Ethan pulled out his phone. He had one more task to complete, the compliance. He went to his own social media profiles. Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. He didn't just unfollow Victoria. He began to archive. He archived the anniversary photos, the vacation albums from Napa, the candid shots of them laughing at galas. He didn't delete them. Sarah, his lawyer, had warned him to preserve evidence, but he removed them from public view. One by one, the digital artifacts of their 10-year marriage vanished from the grid. If she wanted space, he would give her a void. By the time he reached his car, his profile looked like that of a bachelor. Professional, cold, singular. He sat in the driver's seat of his Audi, the leather cold against his back. He dialed Sarah Lynn's office. It's Ethan Bennett, he said when the receptionist answered. I need to schedule a discovery meeting, and I need a recommendation for a forensic accountant. Today. Hold on, Mr. Bennett, the voice said. Ethan looked up through the windshield at the building he just left. He could see their balcony on the 42nd floor. He imagined Victoria up there, finishing her espresso, texting Julian that the coast is clear, laughing about how easily she had trained her husband to sit and stay. He put the car in gear. The engine roared to life, a low, guttural growl that echoed in the concrete garage. She wants a stranger, Ethan whispered to the empty car. She's going to get one. 3 weeks of silence had transformed the penthouse. It was no longer a home. It was a high-end waiting room where two strangers occasionally crossed paths. Ethan had perfected the art of being present but invisible. He was the ghost in his own marriage, drifting through rooms, making coffee, and answering emails, all while Victoria lived a vibrant, secret life right in front of him. It was Friday evening. The air in the master bedroom was thick with the scent of tuberose and sandalwood, a perfume Victoria only wore for special occasions. She claimed it was a networking dinner with the board of the Arts Council. Ethan sat in the leather armchair in the corner of the room, a book open on his lap. He hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. He watched her reflection in the vanity mirror. She was applying lipstick with a precision that bordered on surgical. The shade was a deep crimson, far too aggressive for a stuffy board meeting. She was humming a tune he didn't recognize, a soft, lilting melody that spoke of excitement, of anticipation. You're working late tonight? Victoria asked, her eyes meeting his in the mirror. Her tone was casual, breezy. Since he had unfollowed her, she had stopped guarding her phone with her life. She assumed he had checked out. She assumed he was broken. I have some blueprints to review for the Riverside project, Ethan lied smoothly. I'll probably be up when you get back. Don't wait up, she said, blotting her lips. These old donors like to drink. It could go late. Take an Uber, he said. Don't drive. Already called one. She stood up, smoothing the fabric of her black dress. It was backless, revealing the curve of her spine. It was a dress designed to be touched. She walked over to him, hesitating for a moment, as if debating whether to kiss him goodbye. She decided against it, instead patting his shoulder with a condescending affection. "You look tired, Ethan. You should really get some sleep. You've been working too hard." "I'm working on divorcing you," he thought, but he just nodded. "Have fun." The front door clicked shut a minute later. The lock engaged. The silence rushed back in. Ethan didn't move for a full 5 minutes. He waited until he heard the elevator descend 40 floors. He waited until he was sure she wasn't coming back for a forgotten clutch or phone charger. Then, he stood up and walked out of the bedroom. He didn't go to the window to watch her leave. He went to the kitchen. Victoria had been so focused on restricting his access to her social media, blocking him, hiding her stories, removing tags, that she had forgotten the most basic architecture of their digital life. They shared an ecosystem. Sitting on the kitchen counter was the family iPad, a device they used mostly for recipes and controlling the Sonos sound system. It was linked to their shared iCloud account, an account Victoria used to back up her photos because her phone storage was constantly full. Ethan woke the screen. He didn't need to hack anything. He knew the passcode, 0812, their wedding date. He tapped the Photos app. The sync had happened 10 minutes ago, while she was on Wi-Fi getting ready. The stream of images populated the screen. It wasn't just photos of her outfit trials. It was a visual diary of her betrayal. There was a screenshot of a text conversation from earlier that afternoon. The contact name was saved simply as J. J, wore the black dress. The one with the open back. "I want to see you walking away from him." "Victoria, he won't even notice. He's been a zombie lately. It's pathetic. I almost feel bad for him. Almost. Jay, don't. He had his chance. Tonight is ours." Ethan felt a cold spike of adrenaline in his gut. It wasn't heartbreak anymore. It was nausea. They were discussing him, mocking him. He wasn't just a husband being cheated on. He was the punchline to their inside joke. He scrolled up. There were photos from last week, a lunch date she had claimed was a solo spa day. Her hand holding a cocktail, intertwined with a man's hand wearing a distinct vintage Rolex. Julian's Rolex. Ethan didn't smash the iPad. He didn't scream. He walked over to his laptop bag and pulled out a high-resolution camera he used for site surveys. He took photos of the iPad screen, capturing the timestamps, the messages, the photos. He documented the evidence of the affair, and more importantly, the evidence of the metadata showing where she actually was versus where she claimed to be. He spent an hour documenting everything. Then, he carefully wiped the iPad screen with a microfiber cloth to remove his fingerprints. He closed the app and left the device exactly where it had been, near the espresso machine. He went back to his study and opened a secure, encrypted email draft addressed to Sarah Lynn. He attached the files. Subject: Evidence Batch 01, Thorne Connection. Body: confirmed. It's Julian Thorne. They are mocking the marriage. She thinks I'm oblivious. Proceed with the financial audit immediately. I want to know how much of our money she's spending on him. He hit send. Ethan poured himself a glass of water and walked to the window. Down below, the city lights blurred in the haze of the night. Somewhere out there, Victoria was laughing, thinking she was free. She didn't realize that by cutting him off, she hadn't blinded him. She had simply removed the only person who was looking out for her. Now, only the architect was watching, and he was looking for structural failure. The meeting place was a roadside diner on the far south side of Chicago, miles away from the Gold Coast bistros where Victoria held court. It was the kind of place with laminated menus, flickering neon signs, and coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. It was the only place Ethan felt safe. Sarah Lynn was already there, tucked into a corner booth, a stack of manila folders spread out on the cracked vinyl table. She was a small woman with razor-sharp features and a reputation in Chicago family law that terrified grown men. She didn't look up when Ethan slid into the booth opposite her. She just tapped a manicured fingernail on a printout of the iPad screenshots Ethan had sent. "This is good," Sarah said, her voice low and devoid of sympathy. "The photos, the texts. It proves the affair. But in Illinois, infidelity alone doesn't get you a better financial settlement." The courts don't care about your broken heart, Ethan. They care about the balance sheet. Ethan signaled the waitress for black coffee. He looked at the documents. I don't care about the settlement. I just want her out. I want my name off her lease, my cards out of her wallet. I want it done. Sarah took off her reading glasses and looked at him. Her eyes were dark and serious. It's not that simple. I did some digging into the public records requests filed against your firm in the last month. Do you know who requested a valuation of Bennett Architecture? Ethan frowned. We're private. No one requests a valuation unless we're selling. Or unless a partner is divorcing, Sarah corrected. Victoria's legal team, because yes, she has one already, probably paid for by Julian, has been quietly sniffing around your firm's assets. She isn't just looking to leave you, Ethan. She's looking to cash out. The noise of the diner, the clattering plates, the sizzling grill, seemed to fade into a dull roar. Ethan felt a coldness spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the drafty window. Bennett Architecture was his life. He had built it from a two-person studio into a premier firm. Victoria had never drawn a sketch, never visited a site in the rain, never stayed up for 3 days straight to meet a deadline. But because she was his wife, and because he had been generous with putting her name on assets during the happy years, she had a claim. She wants the firm? Ethan asked, his voice hardening. She wants the money the firm represents, Sarah said. And if she can't get the cash, she'll settle for shares. Imagine that, Ethan. Julian Thorne, your wife's lover and your competitor, sitting at your board meetings because he controls her proxy votes. That is the endgame here. Ethan clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached. The affair was one thing. A personal failure, a romantic betrayal. But this was a hostile takeover disguised as a divorce. It was a declaration of war on his identity. She called me insecure, Ethan said quietly. She told me to unfollow her because I was suffocating her. It was all a distraction. It was a smokescreen, Sarah agreed. She wanted you looking at Instagram so you wouldn't look at the bank accounts. While you were worrying about her likes, she was likely funneling marital assets into accounts we can't see yet. Sarah pushed a document across the table. It was a retainer agreement, but it looked more like a battle plan. If you want to save your firm, we have to stop playing defense, Sarah said. We have to prove dissipation of assets. We need to prove she used your money, the firm's money, to fund this affair. If we can prove she spent marital funds on Julian, hotels, dinners, trips, gifts, we can claim she defrauded the marriage. That gives us leverage to force her to settle for less. To walk away from the firm. Ethan looked at the paper. He thought about Victoria's smug smile when he unfollowed her. She thought he was weak. She thought he was a man who would sleep on the floor to keep the peace. He picked up the pen. What do you need me to do? Ethan asked. I need you to be the best husband you've ever been, Sarah said, her eyes narrowing. I need you to smile. I need you to go to that gala next week and hold her hand. We need time for the forensic accountant to trace the money. If she suspects you know, she'll hide the trail. You have to keep the blindfold on her. Ethan signed the paper. The stroke of the pen was aggressive, tearing slightly through the page. She thinks I'm blind, Ethan said, handing the document back. I'll keep it that way. Good, Sarah said, slipping the file into her briefcase. The forensic accountant starts Monday. His name is Marcus. He finds money that doesn't want to be found. Until then, act natural. Ethan stood up. He threw a $20 bill on the table for the coffee he hadn't touched. Natural, Ethan repeated. I can do natural. He walked out of the diner into the cool night air. The city loomed in the distance, a skyline he had helped shape. He wasn't just an architect anymore. He was a demolition expert. And he had just found the structural weakness he needed to bring the whole house down. The offices of Bennett Architecture were quiet at 9 p.m. The drafting tables stood in silent rows, illuminated only by the faint ambient glow of the city outside. Ethan sat in his corner office, the glass walls reflecting a man who looked composed, though he felt like he was holding a grenade with the pin pulled. His computer pinged. It was a secure notification from Marcus, the forensic accountant Sarah had recommended. The subject line was innocuous, Project V, Phase 1 analysis. Ethan clicked it open. He expected bank statements. He expected credit card receipts for hotel rooms. He wasn't prepared for the chat logs. Marcus had managed to mirror a backup of a messaging app Victoria used, one encrypted, supposedly secure, but vulnerable if the user reused passwords, which Victoria did. Ethan scrolled past the dates. The affair had started 6 months ago, not 3. It began right around the time he was finalizing the contract for the frantic O'Hare expansion, a time when he had been working 18-hour days to secure their future. He stopped at a conversation dated 2 months prior. Julian, he's actually going to the gala in that gray suit again? He looks like an undertaker. Victoria, stop it. He thinks he looks distinguished. It's adorable, in a pathetic sort of way. He's so predictable. Vanilla. I know exactly what he's going to say before he says it. Julian, does he suspect anything about the weekend? Victoria, please. The ATM never asks questions. As long as I tell him I'm stressed and need me time, he just signs the checks. He's funding our getaway, and he doesn't even know it. The ATM. Ethan stared at the words until they blurred. They didn't call him Ethan. They didn't call him my husband. To them, he was just a dispenser of cash, a necessary inconvenience to fund their lifestyle. The humiliation was physical, a cold heat rising up the back of his neck. He forced himself to keep reading. He wasn't reading for pain anymore. He was reading for ammunition. He found it in a thread from 3 weeks ago. Victoria, I need to move the funds for the deposit on the condo. Ethan monitors the joint savings. Julian, use the consulting firm Invoice. Invoice his company for PR crisis management. He'll approve it. He trusts you. Ethan froze. He quickly opened a second window on his screen, pulling up the firm's internal expense reports for the last quarter. He searched for V. Bennett Consulting. There it was. A request for $15,000. Approved by him. He remembered that day. Victoria had come into his home office, massaging his shoulders, telling him she had hired a specialist to scrub some bad reviews online. She had put the paper in front of him, and he had signed it without looking, grateful for her help. She hadn't hired a specialist. She had stolen $15,000 from his company, his employees, his hard work, to put a down payment on a love nest with Julian. This wasn't just adultery. This was embezzlement. This was fraud. The phone on his desk buzzed, jarring him from the screen. The caller ID flashed. Victoria. Ethan took a breath. He closed his eyes for a second, channeling the cold, steel structure of the skyscrapers he designed. He needed to be rigid. He needed to be a wall. He picked up the phone. Hey, he said. His voice sounded remarkably normal. Ethan, are you still at the office? Victoria's voice was warm, tinged with a feigned concern. It's late. You're working yourself to death. Just finishing up some paperwork, Ethan said, looking at the chat log where she called him the ATM. Reviewing some invoices. There was a tiny pause on the other end. A heartbeat of silence. Oh, anything boring? She asked, a little too casually. Just standard overhead. Ethan lied. Nothing important. Well, hurry home, she said, her voice relaxing. I missed you at dinner. I was thinking, maybe we could go to the lake house this weekend? Just the two of us? Reconnect before the big gala next week? Ethan gripped the phone so tight his knuckles turned white. She wanted to go to the lake house. The same lake house where, according to the logs, she had taken Julian 2 weeks ago when Ethan was in New York. She wanted to play happy couple to keep him docile before she made her move for the firm. That sounds nice, Vic, Ethan said. Let's talk about it when I get home. Okay. Love you. Ethan stared at the skyline. See you soon. He hung up. He didn't say it back. He saved the chat logs to an external drive, then encrypted the folder. He had enough now to bury her. But Sarah was right. The kill shot had to be public, and it had to be absolute. He stood up and put on his coat. He would go home. He would sleep in the same house as the woman who was stealing from him. He would smile at breakfast. He would play the role of the predictable, vanilla husband exactly as she wrote it. But he wasn't the ATM anymore. He was the vault, and the lock had just jammed shut. The weekend at the lake house had been canceled. Ethan claimed a sudden structural crisis at the West Loop site, leaving them trapped in the penthouse for a rainy Tuesday evening. The rhythm of the rain against the glass was relentless, a dull drumming that matched the tension inside. They were eating dinner, a rare occurrence lately. Takeout from a Thai place Victoria liked. Ethan sat at the head of the table, methodically working through his pad thai. He wasn't looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at her. He was simply eating, his movements efficient and mechanical. Victoria sat opposite him, picking at her food. She had been watching him for 20 minutes, her irritation mounting like static electricity. She was used to Ethan the pursuer, the fixer, the worrier. She was used to him asking about her day, asking about her mood, asking what was wrong when she sighed. She sighed loudly. A dramatic, heavy exhale. Ethan didn't look up. He took a sip of water. "You're awfully quiet," Victoria said, her voice sharp. "It's like living with a piece of furniture." Ethan dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "Just tired. Long day." "It's always a long day," she snapped. She swirled her wine, the red liquid climbing the sides of the glass. She needed a reaction. She needed to know she still existed to him. When he had unfollowed her, she felt triumphant. Now, she felt erased. "I ran into Julian today," she said, dropping the name like a stone into a pond. She watched his eyes, waiting for the flicker of jealousy, the tightening of the jaw. "He asked about you. He thinks it's weird you haven't RSVP'd to his invite for the after-party next week." Ethan continued chewing. He swallowed, then looked at her with a blank, polite expression. "That was nice of him to ask. I'll check my calendar." Victoria blinked. "That's it. Nice of him to ask. What else do you want me to say?" Ethan asked, his voice flat. "I don't know, Ethan. Maybe show some interest? You used to hate Julian. You used to get so worked up whenever I mentioned his name. Now you act like he's the mailman." "I thought you wanted me to stop being obsessive," Ethan said calmly. "I'm giving you space. Vic, isn't that what you asked for?" "I asked for space, not a lobotomy." She slammed her fork down. The clatter echoed in the large room. "You're doing this on purpose. You're punishing me by checking out. It's passive-aggressive." Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. He saw the panic behind her eyes. It wasn't about love, it was about control. She was like a child tugging on a string, terrified to find that the kite had already cut itself loose. He thought about the chat logs, the ATM nickname, the stolen $15,000. The anger boiled in his gut, hot and corrosive, but he poured ice over it. He imagined himself as a gray rock, boring, uninteresting, impenetrable. "I'm not punishing you," Ethan said, his voice steady, monotone. "I'm just tired. The project is demanding. I don't have the energy to argue about Julian Thorne." "You don't have the energy for us," she corrected, her voice rising. "You're barely here. You come home, you sleep in the guest room, you leave before I wake up. Are you seeing someone?" The accusation was so rich, so projected, that Ethan almost laughed. He had to bite the inside of his cheek to keep his expression neutral. "No, Victoria. I'm not seeing anyone." "Then what is it?" "Look at me." "I am looking at you," he said. "I'm just done fighting. We have the gala next week. It's a big night for you. I don't want to ruin it with petty arguments." He stood up, picking up his plate. "I'm going to finish up some emails. Do you want me to put your leftovers in the fridge?" Victoria stared at him, her mouth slightly open. She looked deflated, confused. Her weapon, her ability to manipulate his emotions, had jammed. She didn't know how to fight a man who wouldn't fight back. "No," she whispered. "Leave it. Okay. Good night." Ethan walked into the kitchen, scraped his plate into the trash, and loaded the dishwasher. He could feel her eyes boring into his back. He knew she was terrified, not because she thought he knew about the affair, but because she thought he had fallen out of love with her. To a narcissist, indifference was a fate worse than hatred. As he walked down the hall to his study, he heard her phone chime. He knew exactly what she was doing. She was texting Julian. She was seeking validation from the backup source because the primary source had run dry. Ethan closed the door to his study and locked it. He sat down at his desk and exhaled a long, shuddering breath. His hands were shaking. Acting gray was exhausting. It took every ounce of his willpower not to scream the truth in her face. He opened his laptop. An email from Sarah Lynn was waiting. Subject: Forensic Update, Phase 2. Body: We found the shell company. It's worse than we thought. Check the attachment. Ethan clicked the file. The gray rock facade dropped the moment he was alone, replaced by the cold precision of the architect. She wanted a reaction? She would get one. But not tonight. And not in the way she expected. The blue light of the monitor was the only source of illumination in the study, casting deep, hollow shadows across Ethan's face. He felt like a radiologist staring at an X-ray, looking at a tumor that had been growing silently, malignantly, for years. The file Marcus had sent was a spreadsheet, dense with rows and columns, but the story it told was simple. It was a story of theft. Ethan's eyes traced the line items. Aurora Strategic Solutions, LLC. It was a vendor he recognized. He had signed off on monthly retainers for them for nearly a year. Victoria had pitched it as a boutique firm specializing in digital footprint management for high-net-worth individuals. She said it was essential for their power couple brand. He had trusted her professional judgment. He had signed the checks, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. According to Marcus's forensic trace, Aurora Strategic Solutions had no employees. It had no office. It had a registered agent in Delaware and a bank account that routed funds directly to a holding company called Thorn Ventures. Julian. Ethan sat back in his chair, the leather creaking in the silence of the room. A wave of nausea rolled through him, different from the heartbreak he had felt weeks ago. This was a violation of a different order. Victoria hadn't just cheated on him. She had tricked him into financing her lover's business. He scrolled further down the sheet. The dates jumped out at him. August 12th, $8,500. Invoice number 402. August 12th was the day they had put down the deposit for the lake house renovation. Ethan had paid for that, too. But on the same day, Victoria had siphoned $8,000 to Julian. December 24th, $12,000. Invoice number 550. Christmas Eve. Ethan remembered that night. They had hosted a party. Victoria had been radiant, wearing a diamond necklace he had bought her. She had toasted to their future. And earlier that day, she had wired $12,000 to her exit strategy. It wasn't just infidelity. It was a parasite feeding on its host. Ethan reached for his phone and dialed Sarah's direct line. It was past midnight, but he knew she would answer. She was a shark who never really slept. "Tell me you're seeing this," Ethan said when the line clicked open. "I'm looking at it right now," Sarah's voice came through, crisp and alert. "It's textbook dissipation of marital assets. But there's more, Ethan. Look at the tab labeled real estate." Ethan clicked the tab at the bottom of the spreadsheet. A single address appeared. A penthouse condo in the River North District. Not a rental. A purchase. "The closing date is set for next month," Sarah said. "The down payment came from the Aurora account. Your money. The deed is in a trust, but the beneficiaries are listed as Victoria Bennett and Julian Thorne." Ethan stared at the screen. The room felt suddenly airless. She was leaving. She wasn't just having fun. She was building a lifeboat. She planned to walk out of his life, likely after the gala, and move straight into a condo he had unknowingly paid for. "She's planning to blindside me," Ethan said, his voice cold. "She's planning to serve you divorce papers once the condo closes," Sarah corrected. "She wants to secure the asset before the legal battle starts. She thinks she's 5 steps ahead." "Is this enough?" Ethan asked. "Is this enough to destroy her?" "It's enough to ensure she walks away with nothing but her clothes," Sarah said. "It's fraud, Ethan. If we press this, Julian could be implicated in conspiracy to defraud. This is leverage. Nuclear leverage." "Good. But you have to wait," Sarah warned, her tone sharp. "Do not confront her. Do not ask about Aurora. If she knows we know, she'll liquidate the account and claim the funds were legitimate business expenses. We need her to feel safe until the papers are served." "The gala is in 3 days," Ethan said. "Perfect. Let her play the role of the glowing wife one last time. Let her think she's the one pulling the strings. When we drop this on her, the shock will be paralyzed." Ethan hung up the phone. He closed the laptop, the screen fading to black. He sat in the darkness for a long time, listening to the rain hammer against the window pane. He stood up and walked out of the study. He moved silently down the hallway to the master bedroom. The door was ajar. Victoria was asleep. She was curled on her side, her breathing deep and rhythmic. In the dim light from the hallway, she looked innocent. Soft. the woman he had loved for a decade. He looked at her hands, resting on the pillow, hands that had signed those invoices, hands that had touched Julian, hands that were preparing to pack bags and leave him in the wreckage. He felt a strange sensation in his chest. The anger was gone. The sadness was gone. In their place was a terrifying clarity. He was an architect, and he knew that the most dangerous part of a demolition wasn't the explosion itself. It was the silence just before the button was pressed. He turned and walked back to the guest room. He would sleep well tonight. He finally knew the blueprints of her plan, and he knew exactly where to place the charges to bring it all down. The days leading up to the Bennett Architecture Annual Gala were always a production, but this year, the atmosphere in the penthouse was brittle. Victoria was in full crisis management mode. She moved through the rooms with a clipboard and a headset, barking orders at caterers, florists, and her assistant. She was building a stage, and she needed her leading man to know his lines. Ethan stood in front of the full-length mirror in the master bedroom. The tailor had just left, having adjusted the tuxedo that Victoria had selected. It was midnight blue, a shade she insisted brought out his eyes, or rather, looked best on camera under the ballroom lights. Victoria walked in, her phone finally lowered. She stopped in the doorway, assessing him. For a moment, the frantic energy dropped, and she looked at him with a strange mix of nostalgia and calculation. "You look good," she said softly. She walked over, reaching up to adjust his bow tie. Her fingers brushed against his neck. A week ago, Ethan would have pulled away. He would have let the gray rock, silence hang between them. But Sarah's warning echoed in his mind. Let her feel safe. Ethan forced his muscles to relax. He looked down at her and offered a small, tired smile. "You have a good eye," he said. "You always have." Victoria paused, her hands lingering on his lapels. She searched his face, looking for the coldness that had defined their last month. When she didn't find it, her shoulders visibly relaxed. The tension that had been coiling inside her seemed to unwind. "I know I've been difficult lately," she said, her voice dropping to that practiced register of intimacy. "The pressure of the firm, the rumors. I just wanted us to be perfect. I'm sorry if I pushed you away." It was a non-apology. She wasn't sorry for the affair. She wasn't sorry for the stolen money. She was sorry that her control over him had slipped. "It's okay, Vic," Ethan lied. The words tasted like ash. "I know how important this gala is to you. To us." "It is," she said, smoothing his jacket. "People have been talking. About why you're not liking my posts. About why we haven't been seen together. Tomorrow night needs to silence them. We need to be the golden couple again. Can you do that for me?" She was asking him to help her sell a lie so she could buy time to leave him. Ethan placed his hands over hers. "I'll be right by your side. I promise." Victoria smiled, a genuine flash of relief. She stood on her tiptoes and kissed his cheek. It was a chaste, theatrical kiss. "Thank you. I knew you'd come around. We're a team, Ethan. We build things." "We do," he said. She pulled away, her phone buzzing again. The moment was over. "I have to take this. It's the lighting director. Get some sleep. Big day tomorrow." She breezed out of the room, confidence restored. She believed the crisis had passed. She believed the predictable Ethan had returned to the fold, unable to resist her gravitational pull. Ethan waited until her voice faded down the hall. Then he took off the tuxedo jacket and hung it carefully in the closet. He wouldn't need it until tomorrow. He walked into his study and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. Inside was a thick envelope Sarah Lynn had couriered over that afternoon. He pulled out the documents. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Motion for temporary restraining order on assets. Every page was flagged with a yellow "Sign Here" sticker. Ethan uncapped his pen. He didn't hesitate. He signed his name with a steady hand. Ethan James Bennett. He signed the affidavit confirming the evidence of adultery. He signed the forensic accounting declaration. He signed the order that would freeze the Aurora accounts and the joint savings the moment the court clerk stamped them at 9 a.m. on Monday. The gala was Saturday night. The papers would be served right as the champagne was being poured. He put the documents back in the envelope and sealed it. He placed it in his briefcase, right next to the speech Victoria had written for him. A speech about trust, foundation, and partnership. He turned off the desk lamp. Tomorrow, he would put on the tuxedo. He would hold her hand. He would smile for the photographers. He would give her exactly what she wanted, a night everyone would remember. He walked to the window and looked out at the city one last time as a married man. The calm was here, but the storm was already in the briefcase. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal. Under the massive chandeliers, 500 of Chicago's social elite mingled, a sea of black tuxedos and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume, champagne, and ambition. Ethan moved through the crowd with Victoria on his arm. She was electric tonight, wearing a silver gown that shimmered like liquid mercury. She smiled at donors, laughed at the right moments, and squeezed Ethan's bicep whenever a photographer raised a lens. To the room, they were the Bennetts. Unbreakable, prosperous, perfect. "There's the senator," Victoria whispered, her lips barely moving. "Smile? He's looking for a reason to approve the zoning for the South Loop Tower." Ethan smiled. It was a reflex now. They navigated toward the VIP circle near the stage. As they approached, the crowd parted slightly to reveal a man holding a flute of champagne. Tall, handsome in a predatory way, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Julian Thorne. Victoria's grip on Ethan's arm tightened imperceptibly, a microspasm of guilt or perhaps excitement. "Ethan," Julian said, extending a hand. "Good to see you out of the office. Victoria tells me you've been buried in blueprints." Ethan looked at the hand. He looked at the Rolex on Julian's wrist, the same Rolex from the photos in the hidden folder. He thought about the $15,000 of his own money that had likely helped pay for Julian's consulting fees. Ethan took the hand. His grip was firm, crushing. "You know how it is, Julian," Ethan said, his voice smooth. "Some of us build. Others just invest." Julian's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He pulled his hand back. "Well, tonight is a celebration. You've built quite a legacy here." "The night is young," Ethan said. "Enjoy it, Julian. It's on the house." Victoria shot Ethan a sharp, warning look, but before she could speak, the MC's voice boomed over the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Bennett Architecture, Mr. Ethan Bennett." Applause rippled through the room, polite and enthusiastic. Victoria reached into her clutch and handed Ethan a stack of index cards. "Stick to the script," she whispered, kissing his cheek for the benefit of the cameras. "It's perfect." Ethan walked up the stairs to the stage. The spotlight hit him, blindingly white. He adjusted the microphone. He looked out at the sea of faces. In the front row, he saw Victoria, her face composed in a mask of adoring support. Next to her stood Julian, looking smug. Ethan looked down at the cards in his hand. He read the first line. "Tonight, I stand here not just as an architect, but as a husband to the woman who makes this all possible." Ethan placed the cards on the podium. Then, he deliberately closed the folder and set it aside. A ripple of confusion went through the front row. Victoria's smile froze. Ethan looked directly into the camera lens at the back of the room. "Architecture," Ethan began, his voice echoing clearly in the silence, "is often mistaken for the art of beauty. We look at the facade, the glass, the steel, and we marvel at the surface. We applaud the image." He paused. The room was dead silent. "But a facade is just a mask," Ethan continued. "It hides the load-bearing walls. It hides the stress fractures. It hides the rot." He looked down at Victoria. Her face had drained of color. She stared at him, her eyes wide, realizing he wasn't reading her words. "In my line of work, we have a term, structural integrity," Ethan said. "It means that the building is honest, that the inside matches the outside, that it isn't lying to gravity." He leaned into the mic. "Lately, I've been thinking a lot about the cost of maintaining a facade, the energy we spend painting over the cracks, the lies we tell to keep the structure standing when the foundation has already crumbled." Julian shifted uncomfortably, buttoning his jacket. He whispered something to Victoria. She didn't respond. She was paralyzed. "Tonight," Ethan said, his voice dropping an octave, intimate and dangerous, "I am done with facades. I believe it is time for a renovation, a stripping down to the studs." Because you can only hide the truth behind a pretty exterior for so long before the roof caves in. He raised his glass. To transparency, Ethan said, and to paying the price for what we break. The audience, unsure if this was a profound metaphor or a personal confession, hesitated for a beat before clapping politely. Ethan didn't wait for the applause to die down. He didn't look at Victoria. He turned and walked off the stage, but he didn't go back to his seat. He walked straight toward the side exit, past the velvet ropes. Victoria scrambled up, hiking her gown, abandoning Julian to chase after her husband. "Ethan," she hissed, catching up to him in the semi-darkness of the wings. "What the hell was that? You went off script. You sounded unhinged." Ethan stopped. He turned to face her. The shadows of the backstage equipment loomed over them. "I didn't go off script, Victoria," Ethan said calmly. "I just wrote a new one. You embarrassed me. Julian is out there. Julian is about to be very busy," Ethan interrupted. He looked past her shoulder toward the corridor leading to the VIP holding room. Two men in cheap suits were standing there. They weren't guests. They held thick manila envelopes. Ethan looked at his wife. "You wanted me to unfollow you. You wanted to be free. I'm just giving you what you asked for." "What are you talking about?" Victoria's voice trembled. Ethan nodded to the men. They stepped forward. "Mrs. Bennett," one of the men asked. The spotlight was off. The real show was about to start. The corridor behind the stage was a jarring transition from the ballroom. The air here was cooler, smelling of dust and industrial cleaner, stripped of the champagne-scented warmth of the party. The muffled sound of the band playing a jazz standard filtered through the heavy velvet curtains, a surreal soundtrack to the execution about to take place. "Mrs. Bennett," the man in the cheap suit repeated. He didn't wait for an answer. He extended his hand, thrusting the thick manila envelope toward Victoria's chest. Reflexively, she took it. "You have been served," the man said, his voice flat, professional, bored. "Petition for dissolution of marriage and a temporary restraining order on all joint and business assets." Victoria stared at the envelope as if it were a live snake. Her perfectly manicured fingers trembled against the rough paper. "This is ridiculous," she stammered, looking from the server to Ethan. "Is this a joke? You're doing this here? Now?" Julian appeared from the shadows of the wings, his face flushed with irritation. He saw the scene, the servers, the envelope, Ethan's calm stance, and his expression shifted from annoyance to confusion. "What is going on?" Julian demanded, stepping between Victoria and Ethan. "Ethan, lower your voice. The board members are 10 feet away." "I'm not raising my voice, Julian," Ethan said. He adjusted his cufflinks, ensuring they were straight. "And you might want to read the second subpoena before you start giving orders." The second process server stepped forward and handed a thinner envelope to Julian. "Mr. Thorne," the server said. "Subpoena for deposition regarding the financial activities of Aurora Strategic Solutions, LLC." Julian's face went pale. The arrogance drained out of him instantly, replaced by the hollow look of a man who realizes he has walked into a trap. Victoria ripped open her envelope. Her eyes scanned the top page. "Asset freeze. You froze the accounts?" "Ethan, I have vendors to pay. I have the closing on the condo next week." "The condo you bought with my company's money?" Ethan asked. His voice was conversational, almost pleasant. "That transaction has been flagged as fraudulent dissipation of marital assets. The bank has already been notified. The down payment is frozen. The closing is canceled." Victoria gasped, a sharp, strangled sound. She looked at Julian, searching for reassurance, but Julian was too busy staring at his own subpoena, calculating his legal exposure. "You can't do this," Victoria hissed, stepping closer to Ethan, her eyes wet with tears of rage. "You checked out. You unfollowed me. You said you were done." "I am done," Ethan said. "That's what the papers are for." He took a step closer to her, invading her personal space for the first time in months. He lowered his voice so only she and Julian could hear. "I read the messages, Victoria. All of them. I know I'm just the ATM. I know about the predictable husband." Victoria flinched physically, as if he had slapped her. The color left her face completely. "So I decided to be unpredictable," Ethan continued. I didn't just unfollow you on Instagram. I unfollowed you financially. I unfollowed you legally. And as of 9 a.m. this morning, the firm is no longer marital property. It's protected by a forensic audit proving you embezzled funds to pay for him. He nodded at Julian, who was now taking a subtle step back, distancing himself from Victoria. Julian, Ethan said, catching the movement. Don't go far. My lawyers will have a lot of questions about the invoicing for Aurora. I hope your investors like reading about fraud in the Tribune. Ethan looked back at his wife. She looked small in her shimmering gown, a statue beginning to crack. The facade was gone. There was no PR spin that could fix this. You wanted freedom, Vic, Ethan said. You're free, but you're broke. He didn't wait for her to scream. He didn't wait for her to beg. He turned his back on them, the tails of his tuxedo jacket swaying slightly. Ethan, Victoria cried out, her voice cracking, desperate. Ethan, wait. We can talk about this. Ethan kept walking down the long, concrete corridor toward the exit sign glowing red in the distance. He could hear the band swelling to a crescendo inside the ballroom. He pushed open the heavy steel doors and stepped out into the cool Chicago night. The air tasted like rain and exhaust, but to Ethan, it tasted like oxygen. He took a deep breath, filling his lungs. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and did the one thing he hadn't done yet. He blocked her number. The silence of the hotel room was different from the silence of the penthouse. It was impersonal, sterile, and mercifully empty. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his tuxedo jacket thrown over the back of a chair, his tie undone. It was 2 a.m. Through the window, Chicago was a grid of glowing arteries, the traffic moving in slow, rhythmic pulses. He poured himself a glass of scotch from the minibar, the amber liquid catching the light. His phone, sitting on the nightstand, had been vibrating incessantly for hours. Not calls from Victoria, she was blocked, but the ripple effect of the stone he had thrown. Texts from board members, confused messages from mutual friends, and alerts from the news cycle that never slept. He picked it up. He didn't check the messages. He opened the social media app one last time. The algorithm, efficient and cruel, still thought he wanted to see her. Even though he had unfollowed her, the Explore page served him a post tagged with #Bennett Gala. It was a video taken by a guest. It showed the moment in the corridor. It was grainy and shaken, but the audio was clear. Victoria's voice, shrill and desperate, crying out his name. Julian backing away, looking like a cornered animal. Ethan watched it once. He felt a strange detachment, as if he were watching a scene from a movie he had seen years ago. The anger was gone. The resentment had evaporated. All that was left was pity. He thought about the woman she used to be, or perhaps the woman he had imagined she was. He thought about the years he had spent trying to be enough, trying to fill the void she carried with his success, his money, his patience. He swiped away from the video. He navigated to his own profile. It was clean. The photos of them were archived, hidden away in a digital vault he would likely never open again. But there was one left. It was a photo from 7 years ago. They were sitting on a pier, eating cheap tacos, laughing at something the camera didn't catch. It was before the firm took off, before the influence, before the brand. It was the only photo where her smile looked like it reached her eyes. He hovered his finger over the image. Sarah Lynn had told him that the legal battle would be ugly. Victoria would fight for every penny, even with the evidence against her. Julian would try to sue for defamation. The next year of his life would be filled with depositions, court dates, and negotiations. But the structural damage was contained. The foundation of his life, his integrity, his work, his self-respect, held firm. He had reinforced the walls just in time. Ethan tapped the screen. Delete this post? Yes. The photo vanished. The grid shifted, filling the empty space with a picture of a skyscraper sketch he had posted yesterday. It was done. Ethan set the phone down, face down. He stood up and walked to the window. The city looked different tonight. It wasn't a backdrop for a power couple. It wasn't a stage for a performance. It was just a city. A place of steel and concrete, waiting to be built upon. He took a sip of the scotch. The burn was pleasant. For the first time in a decade, he didn't know where he would be sleeping next month. He didn't know who he would wake up next to, or if he would wake up alone. He didn't have a plan for the next 10 years. And that was the most beautiful design he had ever seen. Ethan Bennett finished his drink, turned off the lamp, and lay back in the dark. He closed his eyes, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't dream of falling. He dreamed of breaking ground.